Ethan Cross did not build his life overnight. By the time he turned 40, his name carried weight in boardrooms across the United States and beyond. He owned logistics firms, tech investments, private equity stakes, and real estate spread across continents. He flew when he wanted, went where he wanted, and answered to no one. But none of it mattered the way Isabella Cross did. Isabella wasn't just his wife, she was his partner in the truest sense. She challenged him when he became too rigid, softened him when business hardened his edges, and understood the pressure of building something from nothing because she had been there from the beginning. They met long before the wealth. Back when Ethan worked 18-hour days and slept on office couches, Isabella believed in the man he was becoming, not the empire he would one day own. She handled contracts, managed schedules, and often acted as the calm voice in rooms filled with ego. Together, they built more than companies. They built a family. Their son, Lucas, was the center of that world. Quiet, observant, intelligent beyond his years. Isabella adored him. Ethan protected him fiercely, but success attracts shadows. Victor Hale, Isabella's elder brother, had been draining the family for years. Every investment Ethan made in him disappeared into gambling, drugs, and reckless living. Isabella finally refused to help anymore. Margaret Hale, Isabella's mother, resented Ethan's control and wanted access to the wealth through Lucas. She spoke often about family rights and what the boy deserved. And Sophia Lane, Isabella's personal assistant, watched everything from close range. The marriage, the trust, the power. Her admiration for Ethan turned into obsession, and her resentment toward Isabella grew quietly. Ethan noticed none of it. That was his mistake. The trip was supposed to be routine. Isabella had a meeting scheduled overseas, arranged through her office, confirmed by email, approved by her PA. Ethan offered to fly her himself, but she declined. She promised she'd be back in 2 days. The call came that same evening. The plane went down shortly after takeoff. There were no survivors. Ethan stood in his office when he received the news. He didn't shout, he didn't cry. He simply sat down and stayed there until the room emptied, and the night swallowed the city outside his windows. The funeral passed like a blur. Afterward, Ethan closed the doors to the world. He stopped attending social events. He stopped smiling. He stopped explaining himself. He poured everything into work and sent Lucas abroad for safety, telling himself it was temporary. But something inside him never reopened. The house became quiet. The halls became empty. And the man who once built empires beside the woman he loved now lived only for control. That was the version of Ethan Cross the world would come to know. Cold, distant, untouchable, and completely unprepared for the woman who would later walk into his life, not as a lover, not as a savior, but as a cook who refused to fear him. Chapter 2, The Cook Who Didn't Bow. Maya Reed did not come from money. She grew up learning how to stretch meals, how to work 2 jobs without complaining, and how to keep her head down when life offered no shortcuts. Cooking was never a dream. It was a skill she developed because it paid bills and kept her independent. By 24, she balanced part-time studies with whatever work she could find. Cafes, private homes, temporary contracts. She learned quickly, worked quietly, and never stayed where dignity was treated like a favor. That was how she ended up standing at the gates of Ethan Cross's estate. She didn't know much about him beyond the basics. Billionaire, widower, powerful, difficult. The agency warned her plainly. He's not friendly. He doesn't like mistakes. And he doesn't tolerate curiosity. Maya nodded. She wasn't there to be liked. The house itself was massive, but cold. High ceilings, long corridors, everything polished, nothing personal. The kind of place built for power, not comfort. She was shown the kitchen and given rules. Meals at exact times. No improvisation unless approved. No unnecessary interaction. No access to private rooms. Ethan Cross did not come to meet her. She met the silence instead. For the first week, she cooked without ever seeing him. Plates went out untouched. Trays came back empty. Staff spoke in low voices. The house moved carefully, as if afraid of waking something that never slept. Then one morning she saw him. Ethan entered the kitchen while she was preparing breakfast. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed sharply even at home. His face carried exhaustion, but his eyes were alert. The kind that noticed everything. Maya didn't freeze. She didn't rush. She didn't bow. She simply nodded and continued cooking. That caught his attention. Most people tried too hard, smiled too much, explained things he didn't ask about. Maya did none of that. "What's that?" he asked. "Breakfast," she replied, calm, direct. He watched her for a moment, then sat down. The first meal he ate in his own house since Isabella's death was cooked by a woman who didn't look impressed by him. From that day, he started noticing her. She didn't ask questions. She didn't comment on his mood. She didn't react when he was cold. She showed up, did her job, left. When staff complained quietly about his temper, Maya never joined in. When he criticized a dish, she corrected it without apology or resentment. One evening, she overheard two staff members whispering about his late wife. Maya said nothing. She understood grief well enough to know when silence was respect. What Ethan didn't know was that Maya noticed things too. She noticed the untouched photos turned face down in his study. She noticed the locked wing of the house. She noticed the way his shoulders tightened whenever a child's voice echoed on television. But she never asked. That restraint mattered more than she realized. Weeks passed. The house changed slightly. Meals were eaten at the table again. Lights stayed on later. The silence softened. Ethan still didn't smile, but he waited for dinner now. And Maya, without trying to fix him or save him, became the first presence in his home that didn't demand anything from him. That was the beginning, not of love, but of trust. Chapter 3, The House with One Light On. Ethan Cross ran his life on structure. Every meeting had a time. Every flight had a reason. Every emotion had a place, and that place was usually buried. So when Maya Reed noticed that he disappeared every Friday evening without explanation, she didn't ask at first. She just observed. The private jet would be fueled by dusk. A single black car waited by the driveway. Ethan would leave with no luggage, no entourage, no unnecessary words. Sometimes he returned the next morning, sometimes late Sunday night, always tired, always quieter than before. Maya assumed it was business. She was wrong. Lucas Cross lived thousands of miles away, not because Ethan didn't want his son close, but because he was afraid of what closeness might cost. After Isabella's death, things changed fast. Threats arrived disguised as concern, legal letters wrapped in sympathy, family visits that asked too many questions about custody, assets, guardianship. Ethan saw it clearly. Lucas was leverage. So he sent his son abroad under tight security into a private school no one could access without layers of clearance. Every weekend, Ethan flew to see him, never missed one. Not even once. Lucas had not spoken much since his mother died. Not to teachers, not to staff, barely to Ethan. He followed routines, ate quietly, studied without complaint, but the spark was gone. The boy who once ran through hallways and asked endless questions now moved like someone afraid of taking up space. Ethan blamed himself. Back home, Maya continued her work. She cooked, cleaned, studied at night, kept her distance. She had noticed Ethan's coldness from the start, but it didn't bother her. She had worked for wealthy men before, loud ones, cruel ones, men who thought money excused behavior. Ethan was different. He wasn't loud. He wasn't crude. He was guarded. Sometimes when she served dinner, she caught him staring into nothing. Sometimes he forgot to eat. Sometimes he sat at the table long after the plate was cleared. One evening, she found him standing in the hallway, phone in hand, unmoving. "Dinner's ready," she said softly. He nodded but didn't move. She hesitated. "Are you okay?" He looked at her then, really looked, and for a second she saw it. Not anger, not arrogance, but exhaustion. "I'm fine," he said. It wasn't convincing. Weeks passed. Then one Friday, something changed. The jet didn't leave. The car stayed parked. Ethan stayed home. Maya noticed immediately. At dinner, she placed his plate down as usual. He sat across from her instead of at the head of the table. "Plans change," he said, answering a question she hadn't asked. She nodded. "I see." Silence followed. Then unexpectedly he asked, "Do you like working here?" She didn't answer right away. "Yes," she said finally. "I like the order, and the pay is fair." "That's it?" She met his eyes. "That's enough." Something about that stayed with him. Later that night, Maya passed a hallway she had never entered before. The door was slightly open. Inside were shelves, boxes, files. She didn't go in, but she noticed the name on one of the folders, Isabella Cross. She stopped walking. The light in the hallway stayed on long after midnight. And for the first time since Maya arrived in the house, the past began to breathe again. Chapter 4. The name he never spoke aloud. Ethan knew he had made a mistake the moment he saw the light under the hallway door. That room was not part of the house's routine. No staff entered it, no cleaners, no assistants. It existed outside the present, a place sealed off when Isabella died and never reopened. When he reached the doorway, Maya was already stepping back. "I wasn't," she started. The folder lay open on the desk. Isabella Cross. Her name sat there, calm and unforgiving. Ethan felt something snap. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Maya froze. "I was just passing, and the door was open. I saw the file and—" "You had no right," he cut in. "That room is private." "I didn't touch anything," she said quickly. "I swear." But the damage was done. Years of restraint rose at once. Grief, suspicion, exhaustion. The fear that everyone wanted something from him. The fear that kindness was always the first step to betrayal. "You people are all the same," he said, before he could stop himself. Maya's face tightened. "What does that mean? You see a house like this, a name like mine, and suddenly you're curious. Suddenly you're looking for leverage." Her eyes widened. "That's not why I'm here." "Then why were you reading my wife's files?" The word wife landed hard between them. Maya swallowed. "I didn't know it was your wife. I saw the name and—" "You think sympathy changes things?" Ethan continued, anger pushing him forward. "You think getting close, pretending to care, gives you access?" Her hands trembled. "You're wrong." "Are you?" he said. "Or is this how it always starts?" Silence filled the room. Maya bent down and gathered the papers that had slipped onto the floor when she stepped back. She placed them carefully on the desk, smoothing the edges as if respect could still be salvaged. "I came here to work," she said quietly. "Not to steal, not to manipulate, and definitely not to replace anyone." Ethan didn't respond. She nodded once, as if answering herself. "I'll pack my things," she said. "Maya," he started, then stopped. She turned toward the door. "And for what it's worth," she added without looking back, "whatever happened to her, it hurt you. That much is obvious." Then she left. Ethan stood alone in the room. The anger drained quickly, leaving something worse behind. Regret. He looked down at the file again. This time he picked it up. As he began placing the papers back into order, something caught his attention. A document he had read years ago but never truly examined. A flight manifest. A meeting request. A company name he did not recognize. Ethan frowned. He had reviewed the crash a dozen times. Investigations, reports, conclusions, all pointing to mechanical failure. But this name, it didn't fit. He opened his laptop, typed it in. Nothing. No website, no registration, no corporate footprint. His chest tightened. Ethan Cross did not build his empire by ignoring inconsistencies. And for the first time since Isabella's death, he allowed himself to think what he had buried for a year. What if it wasn't an accident? Upstairs, Maya packed in silence. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears rarely changed outcomes. But as she zipped her bag, one thought stayed with her. For a man with everything, Ethan Cross looked like someone who had already lost the most important thing of all. And neither of them realized yet that this night, this argument, had just set two truths in motion. One would destroy the past, the other would slowly, painfully rebuild a future neither of them planned for. Chapter 5. The House Without Her. Maya left before sunrise. She didn't make noise, didn't wait for explanations. She had learned that staying too long in places where dignity is questioned only makes the leaving harder. By the time Ethan came downstairs, the kitchen was clean, the counters wiped, the knives aligned, the refrigerator stocked exactly the way she always left it. But she was gone. Her apron was folded on the chair. That was when the weight of what he had said the night before finally reached him. Ethan sat at the dining table longer than usual, staring at the empty space where she normally stood in the mornings, already cooking before he spoke a word. The silence felt different now. Not peaceful, not controlled, exposed. He went through the day distracted. Meetings blurred together, people spoke, but he answered late. His thoughts kept returning to the same moment. The way Maya's hands trembled when he accused her. The way she didn't argue. The way she chose to leave instead of defend herself. By evening, the house felt unfamiliar. Dinner was untouched. The smell of cooking that usually filled the place was gone. Even the air felt still, like something essential had been removed. That night, Ethan opened Isabella's file again. Not out of grief, out of focus. He reread everything slowly. Dates, names, attachments. The meeting that required her to travel, the email confirming the flight. The company name appeared again. He searched deeper this time. Private databases, offshore registries, shell listings. It took hours. Then something surfaced. The company existed, briefly, registered under a holding firm tied to a personal assistant, Sophia Lane. Ethan's jaw tightened. Sophia had worked closely with Isabella. Loyal, efficient, quiet. He had trusted her without question. When Isabella died, Sophia resigned within weeks, citing grief and stress. He had never looked back, until now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. If this was real, then Isabella hadn't been flying to a legitimate meeting. She had been lured. And if she had been lured, someone wanted her gone. For the first time in a year, Ethan felt anger that wasn't directionless. It had a target. Across town, Maya sat on the edge of her bed in a small shared apartment, her suitcase still unopened. Her best friend watched her quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "I know," Maya replied. "Then why do you look like that?" "Because I let myself believe someone like him could see me as human." She stood and moved toward the window. The city lights flickered outside. She had plans, classes to finish, a life to build. She didn't need a billionaire's house to define her worth, but she couldn't deny one thing. Ethan Cross wasn't cruel by nature. He was wounded, and wounds, if left untreated, turn people into versions of themselves they don't recognize. Back at the mansion, Ethan stood in the doorway of the kitchen, holding Maya's folded apron. He had accused her of stealing, of manipulation, of wanting his money, and yet she had left behind the one thing she used every day. Carefully, respectfully, Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time, he admitted something uncomfortable. He hadn't lashed out because she crossed a line. He had lashed out because she had seen a part of him he refused to face, and now she was gone. Upstairs, a message notification appeared on his phone. From Lucas. "Dad, I'm coming home for the holidays." Ethan stared at the screen. Too much was changing at once, and whether he was ready or not, the quiet life he had built around silence was beginning to crack from the inside out. Chapter 6. The House That Waited. The house had never been this quiet. Ethan Cross noticed it the moment he stepped inside. Not the kind of quiet that came from order or discipline, but the kind that settled when something important was missing. The kitchen lights were off. No smell of food lingered in the air. No soft movement, no background sound. Maya Reed had not come in that day. He told himself it didn't matter. Staff rotated all the time. Cooks came and went. But as the hours passed, the silence followed him through every room of the house. Lucas was coming home in a week. That thought sat heavily in Ethan's chest. For months, his son had lived abroad, protected by distance and security. It was a decision Ethan had made after the threats, the legal pressure, and the subtle attempts by Isabella's family to get closer to the boy. Sending Lucas away had kept him safe, but it had also made the house feel like a shell. Now Lucas was returning, and Ethan wasn't sure the house was ready. He sat alone in his study that night, going through documents that had nothing to do with business. Old reports, old emails, insurance files tied to Isabella's death. He had avoided them for over a year, telling himself the investigation was finished. But something had never sat right. He paused at one file in particular, the company name that had invited Isabella for that final meeting. He'd skimmed it before, assumed it was legitimate, then closed the folder and locked it away. This time, he looked properly. The name didn't ring a bell, and that bothered him. Ethan Cross knew companies. He funded them, acquired them, crushed them when necessary. This one felt thin. No record of past dealings, no trace in his usual networks. He made a note and sent a quiet message to a private investigator he trusted. Someone outside his usual circle. No rush, no explanation. Just a request to look into one company name. Then he closed the file. In the kitchen later that night, one of the housekeepers mentioned casually, "Maya asked for tomorrow off too, sir. She said she needed time." Ethan nodded. Approved. He didn't ask why. But later, standing alone in the kitchen, he noticed something he hadn't before. The knife rack was organized differently. The spice jars were aligned by use, not by label. Small changes, practical, thoughtful. Order created by someone who cared. For the first time, it crossed his mind that Maya's presence had affected more than just meals. She never asked questions, never lingered, never treated him like a billionaire. She worked, she respected boundaries. She left. That night, Ethan stood by the window of his bedroom, looking out at the empty driveway where his son's car would soon arrive. Lucas needed stability, not staff pretending, not therapists reading from notes, not a father buried in work. He needed something real. Ethan didn't yet know what role Maya Reed would play in that future, but for the first time in a long while, he realized the house didn't just feel empty. It felt unfinished. And for the first time since Isabella's death, Ethan Cross accepted a truth he had avoided. Some things worth protecting weren't written into contracts. They walked quietly into your life, and you only noticed their value once they were gone. Chapter 7. When Lucas came home, Lucas Cross arrived on a quiet Saturday morning. There were no cameras, no press, no announcement. Just a black SUV pulling into the driveway and a boy stepping out slowly, taller than Ethan remembered, thinner too. He wore a hoodie, headphones around his neck, eyes guarded in a way no child should be. Ethan walked toward him without saying a word. For a second, they stood there, father and son, unsure of how to close the distance that had grown between them. Then Ethan placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You're home?" he said. Lucas nodded. "Yeah." That was all. Inside the house, staff moved carefully, as if afraid to break something fragile. Lucas responded politely, but briefly. He answered questions with short replies and disappeared into his room not long after. By afternoon, Ethan realized something else. Maya was back. He noticed first in the kitchen. The smell of food, simple but warm, rice simmering, chicken roasting. Nothing extravagant, just familiar. Lucas wandered in quietly, drawn more by habit than interest. He stood at the doorway, watching Maya work. She didn't turn immediately. When she did, she smiled. Not wide, not forced. "Hey," she said. "You must be Lucas." He stiffened slightly. "Yeah, I'm Maya. I cook here." He nodded, unsure what to say. She didn't ask questions, didn't comment on his silence. She simply handed him a glass of juice. "Food's almost ready. You can sit if you want." Lucas hesitated, then pulled out a chair. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Maya spoke again, casually. "I heard you like pasta. I made it the way most kids do. Nothing fancy." Lucas looked up. "You didn't add weird stuff?" She shook her head. "No mushrooms, no surprise sauces." For the first time since arriving, Lucas smiled, just slightly. That evening, he ate more than Ethan had seen him eat in months. Over the next few days, something changed. Lucas started spending more time in the kitchen. Sometimes he watched, sometimes he helped. Maya never treated him like a fragile child or a billionaire's son. She corrected him when he chopped onions wrong, told him to wash his hands again when he rushed, gave him small tasks and expected him to finish them properly. One afternoon, Lucas asked, "Do you miss your family?" Maya paused, then answered honestly, "Yeah, but I'm building my own life." He nodded, understanding more than she expected. Ethan noticed all of it. The way Lucas laughed quietly when Maya teased him. The way he talked more at dinner. The way he stopped wearing his headphones all the time. One night, Ethan overheard Lucas say, "Dad, can Maya eat with us tomorrow?" Ethan froze for a moment, then replied, "If she wants to." When Maya joined them the next evening, Lucas talked through the entire meal, about school, about a project he liked, about things he hadn't spoken about in a year. Ethan watched, saying little. It was the happiest he had seen his son since Isabella's death. Later that night, as Maya was cleaning up, Ethan stood at the kitchen doorway. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him confused. "For what?" "For treating him like a person, not a problem to fix." Maya nodded. He just needed someone to listen. Ethan realized then that Lucas hadn't healed because of therapy or distance. He healed because someone kind had stayed. And for the first time, Ethan Cross felt something unfamiliar stirring beneath his discipline and control. Not desire, not love, but respect, the kind that changes everything. Chapter 8, the day everything broke open. The change in the house was undeniable. Lucas laughed more now. He stayed at the dinner table longer. Sometimes he even waited for Maya before eating. For Ethan, it felt like watching a locked room slowly open, one careful moment at a time, and that frightened him, because peace had never lasted long in his life. One afternoon, while Ethan was away at a board meeting, Maya was asked to clean his study. It was not part of her usual routine, but the head housekeeper insisted. Important documents had been scattered earlier during a video call. Maya hesitated before entering the room. She knew Ethan was private, extremely so, but work was work. She cleaned carefully, avoiding the desk at first. As she picked up a few folders that had fallen near the cabinet, one file slipped open. A photograph slid out. A woman, elegant, calm eyes, a smile that felt familiar. Maya froze. She recognized the face immediately, from the portrait in the hallway. Isabella Cross. Before she could stop herself, her eyes scanned the documents beneath the photo. Flight numbers, dates, a company name she didn't recognize. Internal notes, red markings. Words like rescheduled, urgent, confirmation pending. Something felt wrong, very wrong. The door opened. Ethan stood there. "What are you doing?" His voice was sharp, cold. Maya turned quickly. I was cleaning. These fell. "You were going through my things?" he snapped. "No, I swear, I didn't mean to." He saw the photograph in her hand. Everything inside him ignited at once. Anger, fear, grief. "You think this is your place?" he said, stepping forward. "Or did you think because my son likes you, you could help yourself to my life?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. "That's not why." "You're just like the rest," he continued, his voice rising. "Everyone gets close eventually. Everyone wants something." "That's not true," she said, shaking. "I don't want your money. I don't want your house. I just..." "Enough," Ethan cut in. "I won't have someone digging into my wife's death and pretending it's concern." That word hit her hard. Pretending. Maya dropped the file. Papers scattered across the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have looked. But you don't have to accuse me of stealing or using your son. That's not who I am." She wiped her face, turned, and walked out. Lucas watched her leave from the stairs. "Dad?" he called. "What happened?" Ethan didn't answer. That night, the house felt hollow again. Lucas didn't come to dinner. Maya didn't return to the kitchen. Ethan sat alone in his study long after midnight, staring at the papers still spread across the floor. Slowly, he bent down and began to gather them. That was when he noticed it. The company name on the file. He frowned. He had built empires, invested across continents. He knew nearly every major firm that moved money at that level. This one meant nothing to him. He pulled out his laptop. One search led to another. Shell registrations, fake addresses, a dissolved entity. His jaw tightened. A memory surfaced, one he had buried years ago. The unease he felt when Isabella's plane went down. The questions that never fully added up. The pressure to let it rest. By dawn, Ethan had made a decision. He contacted a private investigations firm he trusted, one that didn't ask questions and didn't leave traces. "I want everything," he said. "The company, the flight, everyone connected to my wife's final meeting." After the call ended, Ethan leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to think what he had been too afraid to admit. Isabella's death had not been an accident, and Maya hadn't crossed a line. She had stumbled onto the truth. Outside, the house was quiet. Inside Ethan Cross, something long dormant had awakened. Not rage, not grief. Resolve, and this time he would not look away. Chapter 9. When the truth took its first breath. The investigation moved faster than Ethan expected. Within days, fragments of information began to surface. Small inconsistencies at first, then patterns that could no longer be ignored. The company that had scheduled Isabella's final meeting was not real in any meaningful sense. It had no operational history, no verifiable partners, and no legitimate financial footprint. It existed only on paper. Someone had created it for one purpose. Ethan read every report himself, late at night, early mornings, in silence. He did not share the findings with anyone, not the board, not his lawyers, not even Lucas. This was no longer about business or caution. This was personal. One name appeared more often than the others. Sophia Lane. Isabella's former personal assistant. Sophia had been efficient, quiet, always present. She handled Isabella's schedule, coordinated meetings, booked flights. At the time, Ethan had trusted her completely. Isabella had trusted her too. According to the investigators, Sophia had been the one who confirmed the meeting location. She had forwarded the email that prompted Isabella to travel that day. The digital trail ended with her. But Sophia wasn't alone. Another name surfaced. Victor Hale, Isabella's elder brother. Ethan's jaw tightened as he read through the financial records. Transfers, cash withdrawals, large sums appearing in Victor's accounts weeks before the crash. Money that could not be explained by inheritance or business dealings. Then there was the third name, Margaret Hale, Isabella's mother. For years, Margaret had pushed for access to Lucas, to Isabella's shares, to oversight of family assets. After Isabella's death, she had intensified her efforts, demanding custody rights, legal influence, financial support beyond what was reasonable. At the time, Ethan had thought it was grief. Now it looked like strategy. The investigators' conclusion was careful but clear. The three had been working together. Different motives, one shared outcome. Isabella's death removed every obstacle. Ethan closed the file and sat back. The anger came later. First came clarity. He replayed the past year in his mind. The pressure to send Lucas abroad, the sudden legal threats, the constant presence of Sophia even after Isabella was gone. All of it made sense now. That evening, Ethan returned home early. Maya was in the kitchen quietly preparing dinner. She had not spoken much since the incident in the study. She kept her distance, professional and guarded. Ethan watched her for a moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology," he said. She turned surprised. "I was wrong," he continued, "about what I said, about why you were in that room." Maya nodded but did not respond immediately. "You were angry," she said simply. "I understand that." "No," Ethan replied. "I was afraid, and I took it out on you." That got her attention. He didn't explain further. He couldn't, not yet. But something in his voice told her this was not about pride. "I'm sorry," he said again. Outside, the world carried on unaware. Inside Ethan Cross, the war had already begun. Maya accepted the apology with a quiet nod, but the distance remained. Trust, once shaken, did not return easily. That night, after Lucas went to bed, Ethan made another call, this time to his legal team. "I want a full case, Bill," he said. "Financial crimes, conspiracy, corporate fraud, everything that applies." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you certain?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," Ethan replied, "and I want it done quietly, until it's airtight." He ended the call and stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. For the first time since Isabella's death, he felt close to the truth. And once the truth fully surfaced, there would be no turning back. Not for Victor, not for Margaret, not for Sophia. Chapter 10. What he built after the storm. Ethan did not move recklessly. That was the first mistake his enemies expected him to make. Instead, he waited. For weeks, life at the estate appeared unchanged. Maya continued her work in the kitchen. Lucas returned to school routines, slowly opening up in ways Ethan hadn't seen in over a year. Board meetings resumed. Business headlines stayed quiet. Behind the scenes, everything was shifting. Ethan's legal team worked with forensic accountants and federal investigators, tracing money trails, digital records, and forged documents. What began as suspicion hardened into proof. Emails fabricated by Sophia, payments routed through shell accounts tied to Victor. Legal petitions quietly drafted by Margaret's lawyers long before Isabella's death. It wasn't grief, it was preparation. When the case finally moved, it moved fast. Victor Hale was arrested first, picked up outside a club he had no business being in. Margaret followed days later, served with charges that stripped her of any claim to Lucas or Isabella's estate. Sophia tried to flee the country. She didn't make it past airport security. The media called it a scandal. Ethan called it justice. He did not attend the hearings. He did not give interviews. His statement was brief and final. The truth doesn't need performance. With the past exposed, Ethan turned fully to the present. He rebuilt his company the same way he rebuilt his life, deliberately. Executives who thrived on shortcuts were removed. Contracts were rewritten. Quality standards returned. Expansion paused. Until foundations were solid again. The people who had quietly done the right thing were promoted and empowered. For the first time in years, the company felt honest. And it showed. Within a year, international partnerships reopened. Markets that had quietly pulled back returned stronger. Growth followed, but it was earned, not forced. Ethan was back in control, yet something was still missing. The house was quieter at night. Success no longer distracted him from the absence he felt once the battles were over. He had protected Lucas. He had honored Isabella. He had reclaimed everything he had built. But inside he was alone. And then there was Maya. She had stayed through everything, not chasing proximity, not asking for favors, not changing how she treated anyone once the truth about him became public. She worked. She studied. She kept her dignity intact. Ethan noticed that more than anything else. He didn't approach her as a billionaire. He approached her as a man. He invited her to meetings under the excuse of tasting menus, then to dinners where business slowly disappeared from the conversation. He apologized again, this time without defensiveness. He listened without interrupting. He showed her who he was when there was nothing left to prove. Maya resisted at first. She didn't want to be chosen out of guilt. She didn't want comfort mistaken for love. She didn't want a life built on imbalance. Ethan respected that. He waited. What changed everything was Lucas. One evening after dinner, Lucas asked Maya if she would stay and help him with his homework. Then quietly, he asked Ethan if she could come to his school event the following week. Ethan saw it then. This wasn't about status. It was about presence. Maya didn't fall for Ethan's power. She fell for his consistency. Months later, she said yes. Their marriage was simple, no spectacle, no headlines, just family, a few friends, and peace. In time, children followed. Laughter filled the house again. Life moved forward, not perfectly, but honestly. Years later, Ethan stood in his office, watching the city from above. The company had grown beyond what it once was. The family beside him mattered more than all of it. He had lost everything once, then rebuilt it correctly. And this time, nothing was hollow. Not the success, not the love, not the man he had become. The end. You've just witnessed another tale of struggle, power, and silent revenge. This is the Billionaire Underdog Stories, where shadows become kings. If you want to become the next billionaire, like and subscribe for more stories like this. See you on the next one.